When my wife told me she didn't love me anymore, I did exactly what she expected. I disappeared. I told Charlotte I was going to a meditation retreat in Montana to find myself. She looked relieved. 2 days later, she moved her boyfriend into our Tribeca penthouse. What Charlotte didn't know? I wasn't in Montana. I was 20 blocks away, watching her plan my social funeral with 8 months of evidence, a $12 million inheritance clause she knew nothing about, and my dead grandfather's letter explaining why he designed the whole thing as a trap. Her birthday party was supposed to be my ending. It became hers. But let me back up, because the thing about betrayal is it doesn't start with the moment they say the words out loud. It starts way before that, in 1,000 small moments you don't recognize until you're looking back through surveillance footage at 2 a.m, watching your wife laugh with her replacement in your living room. It started officially on a Tuesday evening, September 1st. Charlotte chose Balthazar for the conversation. That should have told me everything. She'd made a 7:30 reservation, public enough that I couldn't make a scene, expensive enough that she could still feel like the victim of a failing marriage deserved a nice dinner on the way out. We sat at a table near the window. She ordered the steak frite. I got the roasted chicken, though I knew I wouldn't eat it. She was wearing the Tiffany necklace I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me then, and it's not lost on me now. "Michael," she said, and her voice had that rehearsed quality like she'd practiced this in the mirror. "I need to be honest with you." I set down my wine glass, listened. "I don't love you anymore." 6 words. She'd probably spent hours crafting the whole speech, but those 6 words were the only ones that mattered. The rest was noise, something about growing apart, wanting different things, needing to find herself. I watched her mouth move and thought about how she'd chosen a public place because she was afraid of my reaction. She wasn't wrong to be afraid, but not for the reasons she thought. "How long have you felt this way?" I asked. My voice was calm, even. "A while," she said, which was not an answer. "Do you want a divorce?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me she hadn't thought this far ahead, or maybe she had, and the answer was more complicated than yes or no. "I think we need time apart," she said finally. "Space to figure out what we really want." I nodded slowly, took a sip of wine, let the silence stretch until she fidgeted with her napkin. "I've been thinking," I said, "there's this meditation retreat I heard about from a colleague. Up in Montana, Whitefish Mountain, 2 weeks, completely off the grid. No cell service, no internet, just silence and clarity." Her eyes lit up, actually lit up. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. That flash of relief, maybe even excitement. "That sounds good," she said carefully. "Healthy, for both of us." "I could leave this weekend," I offered. "Give us both space to think." Okay." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm. "Thank you for understanding, Michael, for not making this harder than it has to be." I squeezed back. "Of course." We finished dinner, walked home through Tribeca in silence. It was one of those late summer evenings where the city feels almost livable, warm but not humid, the streets busy but not overwhelming. We passed the CrossFit gym on West Broadway where Brandon worked. Charlotte glanced at it just for a second. She thought I didn't notice. I noticed everything. We walked past our building's doorman, Carlos, who'd worked there for 6 years and always asked about Charlotte's sister, past the lobby with its pretentious modern art installation that Charlotte loved and I tolerated, up the elevator to the penthouse on Franklin Street. The penthouse my grandfather had helped me buy when we got married. The penthouse that was legally mine, not ours, because it had been purchased before the wedding with family money. Details matter. I was about to learn just how much. Inside, Charlotte went straight to the bedroom. I poured myself a whiskey in the kitchen and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably getting a text from Charlotte. Something about how it went well, how I was leaving for Montana, how they'd finally have the space they needed. I finished the whiskey, pulled out my phone. Didn't call the Whitefish Mountain Meditation Center because it didn't exist. I called Trevor Scott instead. Trevor and I went to Yale together. He'd been my roommate junior year, my best man at the wedding, and for the past 8 months, my private investigator. Because here's the thing, I didn't just suspect Charlotte was having an affair. I'd known about it since January. Confirmed it by late January. Documented it through February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. $385 at the Standard Hotel in January. That's what started it. A charge on our joint credit card that Charlotte said was brunch with her sister. The Standard doesn't do brunch. They do rooms by the hour. Trevor confirmed the affair in 2 weeks. Charlotte Morrison Bennett, 29-year-old lifestyle influencer and marketing director, was sleeping with Brandon James Cole, 31-year-old CrossFit instructor. They'd been involved for 13 months. They met 3 times a week at his apartment in Hell's Kitchen, 9th Avenue, between 51st and 52nd. She used marketing meetings as cover, so no, I wasn't going to Montana to find myself. I wasn't going anywhere except my Aunt Margaret's estate in Southampton, 20 miles from the city, but might as well be another planet, because I wasn't disappearing to process my feelings. I was disappearing to watch Charlotte reveal exactly who she was when she thought no one was watching. And in 2 weeks, on her 34th birthday, when she threw a party to celebrate her new life with Brandon, to introduce him to our friends, to announce their relationship, to bury me socially while I was supposedly off-grid searching for enlightenment, I was going to walk back through that door and show her the $12 million mistake she just made. My grandfather had been dead for 5 months. He'd left me an inheritance with a very specific clause. And Charlotte had no idea she'd been taking a test this entire time. She was about to find out she'd failed. Let me take you back 8 months, because none of this started with Charlotte's confession at Balthazar. It started on a Wednesday morning in January when I was doing our taxes. I handle our finances. Always have. Charlotte makes decent money from her influencer work and her marketing consulting, but she's never been detail-oriented about budgeting or expenses. So every January, I sit down with our credit card statements, categorize everything, prepare our documentation for our accountant January 15th. I was going through our joint American Express, the one we use for everything, groceries, restaurants, Charlotte's endless Amazon orders, and there it was, $385 at the Standard Hotel, January 8th, a Tuesday. I stared at that charge for a long time. The Standard is in the meatpacking district, not our neighborhood, not close to Charlotte's office in Midtown. When I asked her about it that evening casually while we were making dinner, she barely looked up from chopping vegetables. "Oh, that was brunch with my sister," she said. She wanted to try their restaurant. You know how Lisa is about trendy places. Lisa lives in Montclair, New Jersey. She has 2 kids under 5. She doesn't do $385 brunches in Manhattan on Tuesday mornings. Also, the Standard doesn't do brunch. I checked. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I said something about how nice it must have been. And then I went into my study and sat there for an hour, staring at my computer screen, feeling the foundation of my life shift beneath me. You know that feeling when you suddenly notice something has always been there, but you trained yourself not to see it? That's what the next 72 hours felt like. I started seeing everything differently. The way Charlotte's phone was always face down on the counter, the way she'd started going to the gym more, 4-5 times a week, the way she'd mention late meetings and client dinners and girls' nights with a casualness that now felt rehearsed. I could have confronted her. Part of me wanted to, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. I didn't want to accuse her of something I couldn't prove. Maybe it was fear. What if I was wrong? What if I was the paranoid husband inventing problems? Or maybe even then, I knew I needed to be strategic. I called Trevor on a Friday. We met for coffee at Bluestone Lane in Tribeca, neutral territory, public but not our usual spots. I need to hire you, I said, professionally. Trevor's 40 now. He'd been my roommate at Yale when we were young and stupid and thought we knew everything. After graduation, he'd gone into the NYPD, worked homicide for 12 years, saw things that made him quit and go private. Now he runs discretion first investigations out of an office in Brooklyn. He specializes in exactly what you think he specializes in. Cheating spouse? He asked, no judgment in his voice, just professional assessment. I don't know, I said. That's what I'm hiring you to find out. He pulled out a notepad. Tell me what you've got. I told him about the Standard, about Charlotte's schedule changing, about the feeling in my gut that something was wrong. You want to know or you want to be right? Trevor asked. I want to know everything. He nodded. Give me 2 weeks. It took him 11 days. Brandon James Cole, 31. CrossFit instructor at Elevate Performance on West Broadway, the gym 3 blocks from our apartment. He'd been working there for 2 years, lived in a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen that probably cost him half his salary. Originally from Ohio, came to New York to make it as a personal trainer and maybe get into fitness modeling. Trevor showed me the photographs in his office, Brandon leaving his apartment on 9th Avenue, Charlotte arriving 20 minutes later, both of them leaving 3 hours later. Timestamps, Tuesday, 10:15 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., Thursday, 11 a.m. to 2:15 p.m., Friday evening, 7 p.m. to 11:45 p.m. She told you she was where? Trevor asked. Marketing meetings, client presentations, networking events? He laid out more photographs. Brandon and Charlotte at a wine bar in Hell's Kitchen. Brandon and Charlotte walking through Central Park. Brandon and Charlotte at a bodega buying groceries together like a couple. The last photograph was from late January. They were standing outside Brandon's building. He had his hand on her lower back. She was laughing, head thrown back, genuine joy on her face. I'd seen Charlotte laugh like that before, early in our relationship, before things got comfortable, before I became someone she tolerated instead of someone she loved. How long? I asked. Based on what I'm seeing and some discreet inquiries I made at the gym, at least 13 months, possibly longer. 13 months. Over a year. While we were celebrating our 5th anniversary, while we were talking about maybe trying for kids, while I was working 60-hour weeks to build my software consulting practice so we could have the life Charlotte wanted. I can get you more, Trevor said. Documentation, voice recordings if you want to go that route, video evidence, whatever you need for a divorce attorney. I sat there in his office looking at those photographs spread across his desk. My wife, her boyfriend, their life together that I'd been funding without knowing it. Keep going, I said. I want everything, every meeting, every conversation you can record legally, every detail. Michael. Trevor's voice was careful. What are you planning? I don't know yet, I said, but when I figure it out, I want to have all the ammunition I need. So that's what we did. For 8 months, Trevor documented everything. 43 meetings at Brandon's apartment, 18 overnight stays when Charlotte claimed she was on business trips or at her sister's house, 6 weekend getaways she'd framed as girls' trips with Kate, hours of audio from Trevor's surveillance of their public conversations, talking about their future together, about when Charlotte would leave me, about how Brandon was so different from her husband. I lived 2 lives during those 8 months. On the surface, I was Michael Bennett, software consultant, devoted husband, maybe a little oblivious that his marriage was dying. Underneath, I was someone else, someone patient, someone methodical, someone collecting evidence, like a lawyer building a case. And then my grandfather died, Richard Bennett, 89 years old. Old money, old Manhattan, old school in every way that mattered. He'd built Bennett Properties from a single apartment building in the 1960s into a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. He'd buried my grandmother when I was 12, buried my father, his only son, when I was 23. I was the last Bennett man, the one who'd carry the family name forward. We held his funeral at Trinity Church on Wall Street on a rainy April morning. Charlotte wore black Prada and the appropriate expression of grief. Brandon texted her 17 times during the service. I know because Trevor had cloned her phone 3 weeks earlier. After the reception at Aunt Margaret's townhouse on the Upper East Side, Margaret asked me to stay behind. Margaret Elizabeth Bennett, my father's sister, 62 years old, never married, devoted her life to managing the family estate after my grandmother died. If my grandfather was the king, Margaret was the chancellor who actually ran the kingdom. We sat in what used to be my grandfather's study on Park Avenue. The room smelled like old leather and older money. Margaret poured us both whiskey, Macallan 25, my grandfather's favorite. "He left specific instructions for you," Margaret said. She slid a folder across the mahogany desk. "The bulk of the estate goes to you, as expected. $12 million in liquid assets, separate from the real estate holdings which remain in trust. $12 million. It was both more and less than I'd expected. More zeros than any normal person sees in their lifetime. Less than what Bennett Properties was actually worth, but the real estate was complicated. Trusts and foundations and charitable obligations that my grandfather had spent decades structuring. There's a condition," Margaret continued. "You have to remain married to your current spouse until your 36th birthday. If you divorce before then, the $12 million goes to your cousin James." I looked up from the documents. "What?" "December 28th, Margaret said. Your 36th birthday, 9 months from now. If you're still married to Charlotte, on that date, the money transfers to you fully. If you're divorced, James inherits instead." "Why would grandfather include that clause?" Margaret's expression was careful. He had his reasons. "Did he think Charlotte was going to leave me?" "Michael." She stood up, walked to the window overlooking Park Avenue. "Your grandfather was many things, controlling certainly, but not cruel. Everything he did with purpose." She turned back to me, and in her eyes I saw something I couldn't quite name. Knowledge, maybe, or sympathy. "There's something else." She opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored paper, expensive stock. My name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting across the front. "He wrote this 3 weeks before he died," Margaret said. "He made me promise to give it to you under specific circumstances." She held the envelope, but didn't hand it over yet. "He told me to give you this if one of two things happened. Either you came to me suspecting Charlotte of betrayal, or your 36th birthday arrived and you were still married, whichever came first." My mouth went dry. "What are you asking me, Margaret?" "I'm asking if those circumstances exist. If you suspect Charlotte of something that would make this letter relevant." I thought about Trevor's surveillance, about the 43 meetings and 18 overnight stays, about Brandon Cole's studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen, about my wife laughing with another man while I worked to give her the life she wanted. "Not yet," I said. Margaret studied my face for a long moment. Then she placed the envelope back in the drawer. "When you're ready," she said, "come back. The letter will be here." I left her townhouse that evening and walked for hours through Manhattan, past the Met, through Central Park, down through Midtown, and back to Tribeca, thinking about my grandfather, about inheritance clauses and sealed letters, about the fact that Richard Bennett apparently knew something about my marriage that I was only just discovering, about the fact that my wife had been cheating on me for over a year, and I'd been gathering evidence, and now there was $12 million at stake depending on what I did next. 9 months. That's what I had until my 36th birthday. 9 months until the inheritance either transferred to me or went to my cousin James, who I barely knew, who lived in California, who my grandfather had always viewed as a disappointment. Charlotte didn't know about the inheritance clause. She knew my grandfather had died. She'd been appropriately sympathetic. But she didn't know what was in the will, didn't know about the $12 million, didn't know that her affair had an expiration date written into my family's estate plan. And I decided, walking through Manhattan that night, that I was going to let her keep not knowing. At least for a while. At least until I understood what game my grandfather had been playing from beyond the grave. At least until I could figure out how to make Charlotte's betrayal cost her everything she didn't know she was gambling with. The plan came together over the next 4 months. May, June, July, August. While Charlotte met Brandon 43 times, while she told me lies about client meetings and yoga classes and girls' nights, I was building something else. A trap. A stage. A vanishing act that would give Charlotte exactly what she thought she wanted, and let me watch what she did with it. Trevor installed the cameras in late August. We did it on a Thursday when Charlotte was supposedly at a marketing conference in Boston. She was actually spending the weekend with Brandon at a bed and breakfast in the Berkshires. I had the receipts. I had everything. Living room, kitchen, hallway, Trevor said as he worked. I'm not touching the bedroom or bathrooms. That crosses legal lines we don't want to cross. I don't need to see the bedroom, I said. I need to see how she acts when she thinks I'm gone, how they both act. He positioned the cameras in smoke detectors, in the air vents, in the decorative bookshelf speakers Charlotte had insisted we buy from Bang & Olufsen. High definition, motion activated, streaming directly to a secure server that I could access from anywhere. You sure about this? Trevor asked when he was done. You mean morally or legally? Both. I thought about that, about privacy and surveillance and the ethics of watching someone without their knowledge. Then I thought about 13 months of lies, about the Standard Hotel, about my father's Navy medals that would soon be packed into boxes labeled junk. These are common areas in a home I own, I said. I'm not recording private conversations in her bedroom. I'm documenting what happens in my living room, my kitchen, my hallway. If she's doing something in those spaces she wouldn't want recorded, maybe she shouldn't be doing it. Trevor packed up his equipment. Call me if you need anything. And Michael, be careful. This kind of thing, watching someone you love betray you in real time, it changes you. I'm counting on it, I said. September 1st, the dinner at Balthazar, Charlotte's confession, my suggestion of Montana, her barely concealed relief. I left on Friday morning, September 4th, made a whole production of it, packed a duffel bag with meditation books I'd ordered from Amazon, hiking boots I'd bought at REI, noise-canceling headphones for the long flight. Charlotte helped me pack. Actually, helped me. Folded my clothes. Asked if I had enough warm layers for Montana in September. The retreat center said nights get cold, I said, but they provide most of what you need. It's all about simplicity, disconnection from material attachments. It sounds perfect for you, Charlotte said. She was sitting on our bed, the bed we'd shared for 6 years, watching me pack to leave. She was wearing yoga pants and one of my Yale t-shirts. She looked comfortable, happy almost. I'll be completely off-grid, I reminded her. No cell service at the retreat. They have a landline for emergencies, but otherwise complete silence for 2 weeks. I won't even be able to check email. That's good, she said. You work too much anyway. This will be good for you, Michael, for both of us. I kissed her goodbye in the hallway. She hugged me. I could feel her heart beating against my chest and wondered if she could feel how hard mine was pounding, not from sadness, but from rage carefully controlled. I love you, she said. I love you too, I replied. Both lies, but mine was strategic. I took our BMW X5, drove it to a parking garage in the Upper East Side, 3 blocks from Margaret's townhouse, left it there. Trevor picked me up in his Jeep and drove me out to Southampton. Margaret's estate, technically my estate now, part of the inheritance my grandfather had left me years ago, separate from the 12 million, sat on 3 acres overlooking the water. 8 bedrooms, a guest house, and a security room that had been installed in the 1980s when my grandmother became paranoid about break-ins. Trevor had upgraded everything, 6 monitors, each one showing a different angle of my Tribeca penthouse. Living room, kitchen, hallway to the bedrooms, the entryway, the study, the dining room. "You're all set," Trevor said. "I'll check in on you. Margaret knows you're here, but Michael, don't do this alone for 2 weeks straight. It'll drive you crazy." "I'll be fine," I said. I wasn't fine. The first day was quiet. Friday afternoon, Charlotte moved through the apartment doing normal things. She ordered Thai food for dinner, watched Netflix on the couch, texted on her phone, probably Brandon, but I couldn't see the screen from the camera angles. She went to bed early. Saturday morning she did yoga in the living room, made coffee, seemed relaxed in a way I hadn't seen her in months. By noon she'd changed into jeans and a nice top, the equipment silk blouse I'd bought her last Christmas. At 1:15 p.m. she checked her phone, smiled. At 1:30 p.m. the doorbell rang. I sat up straighter in the security room, even though I knew what was coming, had known it would come. Trevor had predicted it would take 24 to 48 hours. He'd underestimated Charlotte's eagerness. She opened the door. Brandon James Cole walked into my apartment carrying 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. I watched on the monitor as Charlotte laughed, actually laughed, and kissed him in my entryway. Watched as he looked around the apartment with the expression of someone assessing a prize he just won. Watched as they carried his bags into what had been my bedroom. The timestamp read 1:43 p.m., Saturday, September 5th. I'd been gone for 32 hours. It took Brandon 15 minutes to make himself comfortable in my home. By 2:00 p.m., he was sitting in my chair, the Eames lounge chair my grandfather had given me as a wedding present, drinking my whiskey from my Waterford crystal. Charlotte sat next to him on the couch, her feet in his lap, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. "This place is incredible," I heard him say. The audio was crystal clear. "You said it was nice, but Jesus, Charlotte." "I know," she said. "It's one of the things I'll miss." "You'll find another place. We'll find another place." "With what money? My influencer income barely covers my personal expenses. And the prenup—" "Don't think about that now," Brandon said. He pulled her closer. "We've got 2 weeks while Michael's off finding himself, or whatever. Let's just enjoy it. Enjoy us." I sat in that security room in Southampton, 20 miles away, watching my wife cuddle with her boyfriend in my living room, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not rage, not anymore. Something colder than rage. Something calculating. I pulled out my phone, texted Trevor, "He's here, 32 hours. Trevor's reply came instantly. "Told you. Want me to come out there?" "No, I need to see this." And I did see it, all of it. Sunday morning, Brandon made eggs in my kitchen using my all-clad pans. They ate breakfast at my dining table. Charlotte told him about the party she was planning for her 34th birthday, September 15th, 10 days away. "I want to do it here," she said. "Invite everyone. Make it a celebration." "And tell them about us?" Brandon asked. "I think so. Michael will still be gone. And honestly, even when he comes back, he's not going to fight this. You saw how he reacted. He just accepted it. Suggested Montana. He's probably relieved." I watched Brandon nod, watched him reach across the table and take her hand, watched my wife smile at another man in my home. "We should probably start packing up some of his stuff," Charlotte said. "I don't want him to come back to, mixed signals. If I'm serious about this, about us, I need to show it." "You want to pack up his things?" Brandon sounded uncertain. "Just some stuff. Clear out space. Make room for you." Monday morning, Charlotte called Kate Sullivan, her best friend since college. Kate showed up at noon with coffee and sympathy and U-Haul boxes from the Container Store. I watched the 3 of them, Charlotte, Brandon, Kate, pack up my life. They started in my study. My books went into boxes first. first editions of Hemingway and Fitzgerald that my grandfather had collected, my framed degrees from Yale, the photograph of my father in his Navy uniform taken when he was 23, right before he shipped out to the Gulf War. "Where should this go?" Kate asked, holding the photograph. "Storage," Charlotte said, "with everything else." They worked through the afternoon. My father's Navy commendation medals, the ones he'd earned for his service, the ones my grandfather had framed and given to me after the funeral, went into a box. Charlotte labeled it with a Sharpie. I couldn't see the label clearly on the monitor. Trevor had to enhance the video later. When he sent me the screenshot, I stared at it for 20 minutes. The label said, "Michael's junk." My father's military service, his sacrifice, his legacy, junk. I took a screenshot, saved it, added it to the folder Trevor and I had been building for 8 months. Evidence, documentation, proof. "Is this really necessary?" Kate asked at one point. She was sitting on the floor of my study, looking uncomfortable. "Charlotte, he's only been gone 3 days. What if you two work things out?" "We're not going to work things out," Charlotte said. Her voice was firm. "I told him I don't love him anymore. I meant it. This is happening, Kate. Michael and I are over. Brandon and I are together. I need you to support me on this." Kate nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm here. I'm supporting you. I want to make sure you've thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else for over a year," Charlotte said. Over a year. She said it so casually, like it was nothing. Like 13 months of lying to me while I worked to give her the life she wanted was just something she'd been thinking about. They packed for 3 hours. By evening, 6 boxes sat by the door, ready to go into storage, ready to erase me from my own home. Tuesday evening, Charlotte hosted what she called a planning meeting for the birthday party. 6 people showed up. Kate, 2 other couples from our social circle, the Harpers and the Rodriguezes, who we'd known for 3 years, and Brandon playing host in my home like he belonged there. I watched them sit in my living room, drinking my wine, planning my social funeral. "So the thing is," Charlotte said, and I could hear the rehearsal in her voice, the preparation. "Michael and I have been growing apart for a while. We've decided to separate. It's mutual, amicable. He's actually in Montana right now at a meditation retreat, working on himself." "Oh my God, Charlotte," Jennifer Harper said. "I had no idea. Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Charlotte said. She reached for Brandon's hand. "Actually, I'm more than okay. I've met someone who really sees me, who gets me in a way I didn't know was possible." She introduced Brandon, told them the story they prepared, that they'd met at the gym, that they'd been friends first, that feelings had developed after she and I had essentially ended things emotionally. More lies. But these ones were for public consumption. These ones were crafting a narrative where Charlotte was the brave woman leaving an emotionally distant husband, where Brandon was the supportive friend who became something more, where I was the workaholic who'd let my marriage die through neglect. "We're thinking of this party as a celebration," Charlotte continued. "New beginnings, fresh starts. I'd love for you all to be there, to support me as I step into this next chapter." They all agreed, said the appropriate things, hugged Charlotte, welcomed Brandon into the group. Only Kate looked uncomfortable. She kept glancing at the boxes by the door, at the empty spaces on the walls where my photographs had hung, at Charlotte and Brandon's intertwined fingers. "Charlotte," Kate said quietly when the others were getting more wine from the kitchen. "Are you sure about the timing? About doing this at your birthday party while Michael's still technically—" "I'm sure," Charlotte said. "This is my 34th birthday, Kate. My life. I'm not going to keep pretending." After everyone left, Charlotte and Brandon stayed up late, refining the details, the caterer, the music, the speech Charlotte would give, the one about authenticity and courage and living your truth. "Should we say something about Michael?" Brandon asked, like, wish him well on his journey? That's good, Charlotte said. That's classy. We take the high road. Make it clear there's no drama, no hard feelings, just two people who want different things. I sat in the security room, listening to them plan how to bury me with kindness and false compassion, and I thought about my grandfather's sealed letter, about the inheritance clause, about the $12 million Charlotte didn't know she'd been gambling with. Thursday afternoon, while Charlotte was out having lunch with her mother, Brandon went into my study. I watched him on the monitors, watched him open drawers, rifle through papers. He was looking for something. He found it in the bottom drawer of my desk. The folder from Margaret, estate documents from Whitfield and Associates Estate Planning. I'd left them there deliberately. Not the full documents, those were locked in Margaret's safe. But enough. The letterhead. A summary page that mentioned substantial trust holdings and $11.3 million in liquid assets to be transferred upon satisfaction of conditions. Brandon pulled out his phone, took photographs of the documents. That evening when Charlotte got home, he showed her. "Baby," he said, and his voice had a new energy to it, an excitement. "Look what I found." They sat on the couch, my couch, and went through the photos on his phone. $11 million? Charlotte's voice was quiet. His grandfather left him $11 million. The document says it transfers on some conditions, something about his birthday. I couldn't get the full details, but Charlotte, if you're married to him when this money comes through, you're entitled to half in a divorce. New York's a 50-50 state for marital property. It's not marital property if it's inheritance, Charlotte said slowly. She knew at least that much. But still, even with the prenup, I'd get something. Community assets, 6 years of marriage. Exactly. So maybe... Brandon stopped, looked at her carefully. Maybe we don't rush this. Maybe you take your time with the divorce. Make sure everything's positioned right. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. I don't want to stay married to Michael for money. I'm not saying stay married forever. I'm just saying be smart about timing. That's all. She nodded slowly. Let me think about it. But I could see it in her face. The calculation. The same calculation my grandfather had apparently seen at our wedding. The same calculation that had made him write that sealed letter and structure an inheritance with a marriage clause. Charlotte wasn't thinking about love or authenticity or living her truth. She was thinking about money, about how much she could get, about whether $11 million was worth delaying her public debut with Brandon. I took more screenshots, saved the footage, added it to Trevor's expanding file. Friday night, 3 days before the party, Charlotte made her decision. I want to do the party as planned, she told Brandon. Introduce you, tell everyone about us, live authentically. The money stuff, we'll figure it out later. Right now, I just want to celebrate my life, my truth. You sure? Brandon asked. I'm sure, she said. This party is about new beginnings, about stepping into who I really am. Michael will come back from Montana and we'll deal with the divorce then, but I'm not hiding anymore, not even for $11 million. She said it like it was noble, like she was choosing integrity over wealth. She had no idea she was choosing to throw away 6 times that amount. She had no idea that the inheritance required I stay married until December 28th, my 36th birthday, and that divorcing before then would mean she got the prenup and nothing more. She had no idea my grandfather had designed this exact test, and she had no idea I'd been watching her fail it for the past 8 days. Sunday evening, September 13th, 48 hours before her birthday party, I sat in the security room and watched Charlotte and Brandon rehearse her speech one final time. Life's too short to live inauthentically, she said, standing in my living room, practicing for the mirror. Michael and I have chosen different paths, and that's okay. I'm grateful for this community supporting me as I step into my truth with someone who truly partners with me. Brandon applauded, told her it was perfect. I checked my watch. 43 hours until the party. 43 hours until I walked back through that door and showed Charlotte exactly what her truth was going to cost her. I opened my laptop, pulled up the video files Trevor and I had compiled. 8 months of documentation, 43 meetings, 18 overnight stays, 6 weekend getaways. The standard hotel charge from January. Brandon moving in 32 hours after I left. My father's medals in a box labeled junk. The party planning meetings, the trust fund discovery, Charlotte's speech about authenticity and truth. And then I opened the drawer in Margaret's desk. I'd driven into the city that afternoon and took out the sealed envelope. The one my grandfather had written 3 weeks before he died. I opened it. I read it. And I understood everything. The letter was written on my grandfather's personal stationery, heavy cream paper with Richard J. Bennett embossed at the top. His handwriting, the same careful script he'd used to sign my birthday cards every year until I was 30, until his hands got too unsteady. It was dated April 18th, 3 weeks before he died. I sat in Margaret's study, his study, with the letter in my hands, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt something other than cold calculation. I felt my grandfather's presence, his voice coming through the page. Michael, if you're reading this, one of two things has happened. Either Margaret has given you this letter because you've discovered Charlotte's betrayal, or it's December 28th and you're still married and wondering why I included that peculiar clause in my will. I'm hoping it's the former. I'm hoping you've discovered the truth sooner rather than later. Because, son, I've known about Charlotte and that CrossFit instructor for 2 years. 2 years. I stopped reading, looked up at the ceiling. 2 years. My grandfather had known for 2 years. I hired an investigator in the spring 2 years ago, not because I suspected anything specific, but because I'm old and paranoid and I wanted to make sure the woman my grandson married was who she presented herself to be. What I found disappointed me, though it didn't surprise me. I saw Charlotte at your wedding, Michael, watched her during the reception. Most brides spend the evening in a happy fog, overwhelmed with joy. Charlotte spent it networking. I watched her tally wedding gifts as they arrived, watched her assess guests by their potential value. She smiled at my friends from the real estate world differently than she smiled at your college friends. She made sure to spend extra time with the Vanderbilts, the Whitfields, anyone with money and influence. I thought maybe I was being unfair. Maybe I was a cynical old man who'd forgotten what young love looked like. So I said nothing. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Then I hired Trevor's firm to do a routine background check, standard procedure for anyone entering the Bennett family. That's when I learned about Brandon, about the affair that had already been going on for months, even then, about Charlotte's plans to stay married to you exactly long enough to establish herself in Manhattan's social circles, then leave for someone younger, more exciting, less burdened by family expectations. I set the letter down, stood up, walked to the window overlooking Park Avenue. My grandfather had known. For 2 years, he'd watched me live in ignorance, watched me work to make Charlotte happy, watched me talk about maybe trying for kids, about our future, about growing old together, and he'd said nothing. I picked the letter back up. You're angry that I didn't tell you. I understand that. But Michael, if I'd told you 2 years ago, what would you have done? Confronted her immediately. Divorced her in a rage. You'd have been the betrayed husband, certainly, but you'd also have spent the rest of your life wondering if you'd acted too quickly. If maybe you'd misunderstood. If perhaps there was something you could have done differently. This way, my way, you've had time. Time to gather evidence. Time to understand the full scope of her deception. Time to see exactly who Charlotte Morrison truly is when she thinks no one important is watching. And time to make a choice about who you want to be in response. The inheritance clause isn't about money, son. It's about clarity. It's a test. Not for Charlotte, though she's certainly being tested. It's a test for you. Here's how it works. By your 36th birthday, you'll know Charlotte's truth. If she's already left you, she chose poorly, and you're free. free of her, free of doubt, and financially secure enough to rebuild whatever life you want. If she stayed without knowing about the inheritance, perhaps I misjudged her. Perhaps she does love you, and I'm just a paranoid old man. If she stays only after learning about the money, you'll have absolute clarity about her character. But here's the real test, Michael. What will you do with that clarity? You're my grandson. You have my blood, my name, my fortune. You're smart, strategic, patient when you need to be. These are virtues, but they can also become vices. I've watched you build walls around yourself since your father died, watched you choose safety over risk, comfort over passion. You married Charlotte because she was appropriate, suitable, because she fit the life you thought you were supposed to want. Did you ever really love her? Or did you love the idea of her, the Instagram perfect wife, the Tribeca lifestyle, the appearance of having everything figured out? I'm not excusing her betrayal. What she's done is unconscionable, but I am asking you to examine your own role in this marriage, to ask yourself honest questions about whether you built a life together or just a performance of one. Here's what I want you to understand. You're about to have power over Charlotte. The inheritance clause gives you leverage. The knowledge of her affair gives you ammunition. You can destroy her socially, financially, emotionally. The question is, should you? I've structured this inheritance specifically to put you at this crossroads. You can take the high road, confront her privately, divorce quietly, walk away with your dignity and your wealth intact. Or you can take the low road, expose her publicly, use the inheritance as a weapon, make her pay for every lie she's told. Both options are legally available to you. Both are financially viable. The question isn't what you can do. It's what kind of man you want to be. I'll tell you a secret, Michael. I've done both in my lifetime. When your grandmother had her affair, yes, she had one in 1979 with her tennis instructor of all cliches, I found out and I buried him. Professionally, socially, financially. I made that man's life so difficult he left New York entirely. And I kept your grandmother and we stayed married for 30 more years. And you know what? Those were the unhappiest 30 years of my life. Not because she'd betrayed me, but because I'd become someone cruel in response. Someone who wielded power like a weapon. Someone who couldn't let go of being wronged. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking you to be conscious of the choice. To understand that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it costs something. It cost me 3 decades of peace. It cost me the ability to trust anyone fully ever again. Whatever you decide, know this. You're a Bennett. You're my grandson. You have options that most men in your situation don't have. You have wealth, family support, legal protection, and social standing. You're going to be fine, regardless of what Charlotte does or doesn't do. The question is, who do you want to be on the other side of this? With love and complicated wisdom, Grandpa, I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat in that study for 2 hours, not moving, just thinking. My grandfather had known. He'd watched me marry Charlotte, knowing she was already having an affair. He'd structured his entire inheritance around creating this moment, this choice. He'd turned my betrayal into a moral examination. And he was right about everything. I hadn't loved Charlotte, not really, not the way people talk about love in wedding vows and anniversary toasts. I'd loved the idea of her. I'd loved having a beautiful wife who looked good in photographs. I'd loved the ease of our social life, the way she could charm my clients and colleagues. I'd loved not being alone. But had I ever really known her? Had I ever asked her what she wanted beyond the lifestyle I provided? Had I noticed when she stopped being happy, or had I just assumed that money and security and a Tribeca penthouse were enough? These were uncomfortable questions. Questions I didn't want to answer. But my grandfather was wrong about one thing. Charlotte had made her own choices. For 13 months, for 2 years apparently, she'd chosen to lie, to cheat, to stay married to me for the life I provided while building a separate life with Brandon. She'd had options. She could have left, could have been honest, could have given me the dignity of truth instead of the humiliation of deception. She'd chosen this path, and now I was going to show her where it led. I pulled out my phone, called Trevor. "I need you to prepare something for Saturday night," I said. "Charlotte's birthday party. I'm going to be there." "What do you need?" "A video compilation. Clean, professional, damning. The surveillance footage from the past 2 weeks, Brandon moving in, the party planning, the conversation about the trust fund, Charlotte packing my father's medals into a box labeled junk. All of it, edited down to about 10 minutes. Can you have that ready by Saturday evening?" "I can have it ready by Friday," Trevor said. "But Michael, are you sure about this? Public confrontation." "She's planning a public celebration of my absence," I said. "Seems only fair I show up." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give her a choice," I said. "A real one. Maybe the first honest choice she's made in our entire marriage." I hung up, walked to Margaret's desk, looked at the calendar. September 13th, Sunday evening. The party was Saturday the 15th. My 36th birthday was December 28th, 3 months and 2 weeks away. 3 months and 2 weeks until the inheritance transferred. 3 months and 2 weeks that Charlotte could either spend married to me for $6 million or spend as Brandon's girlfriend with $500,000 and her dignity. Either way, she was going to understand exactly what my grandfather had been testing, and she was going to understand that she'd failed. I called Margaret next. "I read the letter," I said. And I'm going to need a lawyer. Not a divorce attorney. I already have one on retainer. I need someone who specializes in inheritance law. Someone who can explain to Charlotte very clearly what the marriage clause means and what her options are." "Michael," Margaret's voice was careful, "what are you planning?" "I'm planning to let Charlotte make an informed decision for once in her life," I said. "She's been operating on incomplete information, making choices without understanding consequences. I'm going to give her complete clarity, and then I'm going to let her choose." "That's very generous of you," Margaret said, though her tone suggested she didn't quite believe it. "It's not generous," I said. "It's the test. Grandfather designed it. I'm just administering it." I spent Monday and Tuesday in Southampton alone, except for Margaret's brief visits. Watched the surveillance feeds, watched Charlotte and Brandon live in my home, plan my social funeral, rehearse her speech about authenticity. Wednesday morning, I drove back to Manhattan, met with Trevor at his office in Brooklyn, reviewed the video compilation he'd prepared, 10 minutes and 30 seconds of Charlotte's 2 weeks in my absence, edited with timestamps and minimal commentary. Just facts, just truth. "It's brutal," Trevor said. "Effective, but brutal." "Good," I said. Thursday, I met with the inheritance lawyer Margaret had recommended. Harold Whitfield, 72, White Shoe Manhattan law firm, specialist in estate planning and complex trusts. "The clause is ironclad," he told me. "If you're married to Charlotte Bennett on December 28th, the $12 million transfers to you. If you're divorced by that date, it goes to your cousin. There's no ambiguity, no loopholes. And if Charlotte and I separate but remain legally married, that satisfies the clause," Whitfield said. "The will specifies married, not happily married. You could live in separate states and it would still qualify." So if I offered Charlotte the option to stay legally married for 3 months, living separately, and then divorce after the inheritance transfers, that would work. "It would work," Whitfield confirmed. "Though I'd want to document everything carefully. Make sure both parties understand the terms. Make sure there's no claim of coercion later." "There won't be," I said, "because I'm going to offer her the alternative of leaving immediately with her prenup. Her choice, fully informed, witnessed by 24 people." Whitfield studied me over his reading glasses. "You're going to do this publicly?" "She made our relationship public," I said. "Seems only fair the dissolution is equally transparent." Friday evening, I was back in Southampton, final preparations. Trevor sent me the finished video file. I watched it one more time, saw my wife and her boyfriend in my home, saw them pack my life into boxes, saw them plan my replacement, saw Charlotte practice her speech about living authentically while lying to everyone who mattered. Saturday morning, September 15th, Charlotte's 34th birthday. I woke up at 5 a.m., showered, shaved carefully, put on the Tom Ford suit I'd worn at our wedding, navy blue, perfectly tailored, a reminder of who I'd been when I promised to love her forever. Trevor picked me up at 9 p.m. We drove into Manhattan, parked 3 blocks from the penthouse. "You sure about this?" he asked one more time. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. At 10:30, we walked to Franklin Street. Stood outside my building, looked up at the penthouse. I could see lights, hear music, faintly. Fleetwood Mac. Dreams. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Party started at 7, Trevor said, checking his phone. "Most guests will have left by now. Should be just the core group. Exactly like you wanted." "Let's go," I said. We walked into the building. Carlos, the doorman, looked shocked. "Mr. Bennett, I thought you were in Montana," I finished. "Change of plans, Carlos. Have a good evening." We took the elevator up. I had my keys. I had Trevor's video file loaded on my tablet. I had Harold Whitfield's phone number in my pocket and a process server's card that I didn't actually need but brought anyway for effect. I had 8 months of evidence. I had my grandfather's letter. I had absolute clarity about who Charlotte was and what she'd done. And I had a choice to offer her that would either make her $6 million or reveal her as exactly what my grandfather had always suspected she was. At 11 p.m. exactly, I unlocked my front door and walked into my own home. The music hit me first. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, playing through the Bang & Olufsen speakers Charlotte had insisted we needed. The ones that cost $6,000, the ones that now had surveillance cameras hidden inside them. I could hear voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. Through the partially open door, I could see into the living room. About 20 people remained, the after-party crowd, the inner circle, Kate Sullivan, the Harpers, the Rodriguezes. A few of Charlotte's influencer friends I'd never particularly liked. And Brandon standing by the window, drink in hand, comfortable and confident in my home. Charlotte stood in the center of the room, holding a champagne flute. She was wearing the black dress from Zimmerman I'd bought her for her birthday, bought her last month before she told me she didn't love me anymore. She looked beautiful, happy, more alive than I'd seen her in years. She was mid-sentence when I opened the door fully. And that's what I've learned this year. That life's too short to live inauthentically, to stay in situations that don't serve your growth. Michael and I will always care about each other, but we want different things. And I'm grateful to all of you for supporting me as She saw me. The champagne flute slipped from her hand. It fell in what felt like slow motion. Expensive crystal tumbling through air, catching light, then shattering against the hardwood floor. Shards of glass scattered across the living room. Champagne pooled on the floor like a stain. The music kept playing for another 3 seconds. Then someone, Jennifer Harper, I think, reached over and turned it off. Silence. 20 faces turned to stare at me. 20 people who'd spent the evening celebrating my absence, celebrating Charlotte's brave decision to leave her emotionally distant husband, celebrating new beginnings and authentic love. "Hi, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, even. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic from Montana was terrible." Charlotte's face had gone completely white. Brandon set his drink down, slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might trigger something. "Michael," Charlotte's voice cracked. "What are you... You're supposed to be... in Montana?" I finished. "Yeah, about that." I walked further into the room. Trevor followed, his phone out, recording. I wasn't in Montana. I was watching. I looked around at the faces. Kate looked like she might be sick. The Harpers exchanged glances. Charlotte's influencer friends looked confused. already mentally composing their posts about this drama. Watching? Charlotte repeated. I pulled out my tablet. Trevor, can you connect this to the TV? Michael, what are you doing? Charlotte found her voice, found some strength. This is my birthday party. These are my friends. You can't just... Can't just what? Come home, to my home. I looked at her evenly. I've been home this whole time, Charlotte. I've just been 20 miles away, but thanks to some excellent surveillance equipment, I've been able to watch everything that happened here while I was supposedly off-grid, finding myself. I nodded to Trevor. He'd connected my tablet to the TV. The screen flickered to life. I want to show you all something, I said. It's about 10 minutes long. I recommend you watch the whole thing. Consider it my contribution to Charlotte's birthday celebration. I pressed play. The video started with a timestamp, Friday, September 4th, 1:43 p.m. The camera showed my front door opening, Charlotte's laugh, Brandon walking in with suitcases. Oh my God, someone whispered. The video continued, Brandon making himself at home, the two of them kissing in my kitchen, the planning meetings, Charlotte telling Kate and the others about her plans to introduce Brandon, to celebrate her new beginning. The conversation about the trust fund, Brandon taking photos of the estate documents. And then, the moment that made me physically ill when I'd first seen it, Charlotte and Brandon packing my father's things. The label on the box, clear and sharp in high definition, Michael's junk. The camera zoomed in on that label, held on it for 5 seconds, then cut to another timestamp, another scene, another lie, 10 minutes. I'd watched people sit through 10-minute videos before, seen them fidget, check their phones, lose interest. No one moved during these 10 minutes. No one looked away. When it ended, the silence in the room was absolute. Charlotte was crying, silent tears running down her face, smudging her makeup. Brandon looked like he wanted to run but couldn't figure out which direction to go. So, I said, my voice still calm, still controlled. That's what happened while I was gone. That's what my wife did 32 hours after I left to give her space. That's the authentic life she's been living. Michael. Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. I can explain. You really can't, I said. I've heard all your explanations. I've heard you tell Brandon about your plans. I've heard you tell your friends about my journey of self-discovery. I've heard every lie you've told for the past 2 weeks. Hell, I've heard every lie you've told for the past 13 months. Trevor's been documenting everything since January. Kate stood up. Charlotte, is all of this true? Charlotte didn't answer, didn't look at anyone except me. But here's the interesting part, I continued. The part you don't know about. See, my grandfather died 5 months ago. You remember, you were very sympathetic. You wore black Prada to the funeral. What does your grandfather have to do with... He left me $12 million, I said. The room reacted, sharp intakes of breath. Someone said, Jesus Christ, under their breath. 12 million, I repeated, with one condition. I have to stay married to you until my 36th birthday, December 28th, 3 months and 2 weeks from now. If I divorce you before then, the money goes to my cousin James. Charlotte's eyes widened. I watched her do the math, watched her realize what she'd been gambling with without knowing it. But here's the really interesting part, I said. I pulled the letter from my jacket pocket. My grandfather knew about your affair, knew about it 2 years ago, and he wrote me this letter 3 weeks before he died. I unfolded the cream-colored paper, started reading. Michael, if you're reading this, you've discovered Charlotte's betrayal. I've known about her and that CrossFit instructor for 2 years. I hired an investigator. What I found disappointed me, though it didn't surprise me. I saw Charlotte at your wedding, watched her during the reception. Most brides spend the evening in a happy fog. Charlotte spent it networking. She tallied wedding gifts as they arrived. She assessed guests by their potential value. I looked up from the letter. looked directly at Charlotte. He watched you at our wedding and knew exactly who you were. So he designed this inheritance with a marriage clause specifically to test you, to see what you'd do, whether you'd stay for love or leave for money, whether you'd have patience or greed. That's insane, Brandon said. Your dead grandfather can't control your life from beyond the grave. He's not controlling my life, I said. He's clarifying it. He gave me information, evidence, resources. What I do with them is my choice. I walked to the center of the room, stood where Charlotte had been standing when I'd walked in, stood on the broken glass and champagne stain. So here's where we are, I said. Charlotte, you've been married to $12 million for 5 months and didn't know it. You've been planning to leave me, to start your authentic life with Brandon, to tell all our friends about your brave decision. You even found some of the estate documents. Brandon took photos of them. You know about the 11 million... I smiled slightly. But you didn't know about the marriage clause. I looked around the room, at the faces watching this play out like it was a Netflix drama come to life. Here's how the inheritance works. If I'm still married to Charlotte on December 28th, just legally married, doesn't matter if we're living together or happy or anything else, the money transfers to me. At that point, we could divorce the next day. And in New York, even with our prenup, Charlotte would be entitled to a significant portion, half the marital assets. After the inheritance, she'd walk away with about $6 million. I saw Charlotte's face change, saw her brain working through the implications. But if we divorce before December 28th, she gets the prenup, $500,000, not nothing certainly, but not $6 million. Michael, Charlotte said. Her voice was stronger now, calculating. Can we talk about this privately? No, I said simply. You chose a public forum for your celebration. I'm choosing the same forum for this conversation. I turned to face her fully. I'm going to offer you a choice, Charlotte, right here, right now, in front of everyone. 2 options. I held up one finger. Option 1, we stay married for 94 days. Separate bedrooms, separate lives, no intimacy, no pretense of reconciliation, just a legal arrangement. I'll move to the guest room. You can stay in the master. We'll be civil in public, distant in private. On December 28th, the money transfers. On December 29th, we file for divorce. Split the assets according to New York law. You walk away with approximately $6 million. I held up a second finger. Option 2, you leave tonight, right now, with Brandon. Pack your things, walk out that door, live your authentic life immediately. File for divorce next week. Get your prenup, $500,000. Start your new beginning with the person you actually love. The room was absolutely silent. $6 million for 94 days of pretending to be married, I said. Or $500,000 for your freedom tonight, your choice. But you need to make it right now, before midnight, in front of all these witnesses. You can't be serious, Charlotte said. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I said. You've been making choices about our marriage for 13 months without consulting me. Now I'm giving you one more choice, a real one, with complete information. Brandon stepped forward. This is manipulation. I'm trying to give her exactly what my grandfather gave me. I interrupted. Clarity. Charlotte's been living in the dark, making decisions based on incomplete information. Now she has all the facts. Now she can choose. I looked at Charlotte. What's it going to be? 94 days for $6 million? Or walk out tonight with Brandon and your dignity? Charlotte opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Brandon. Brandon looked back at her, and I saw something shift in his face, some calculation of his own. He leaned in close to her, whispered. But Trevor's phone was recording, and Trevor had positioned himself perfectly to catch audio. Baby, Brandon whispered, thinking this was private, thinking no one else could hear. It's just 3 months. We can still see each other. You just have to play it smart. 6 million, Charlotte. We could open 10 gyms with that money. Charlotte's face changed. She pulled back slightly, looked at Brandon like she was seeing him for the first time. What did you say? Her voice was quiet. I said we should be smart about this, Brandon said, louder now, realizing people were listening. I said whatever you decide, I support you. No, Charlotte said. You said we could open 10 gyms. You said 6 million. I just meant... You meant you want me to stay married to Michael for 3 months so we can split $6 million, Charlotte said. Her voice was getting louder, sharper. You want me to prostitute myself for 94 days for money. That's not... Charlotte, you're twisting. Am I? She turned to me. Play that back. What Brandon just said. You recorded it, didn't you? I looked at Trevor. He nodded. Pulled up the audio on his phone. Played it back. Brandon's voice, clear as day. It's just 3 months. We can still see each other. You just have to play it smart. 6 million, Charlotte. We could open 10 gyms with that money. Charlotte stood there in her black Zimmerman dress, surrounded by broken glass and champagne and the ruins of her birthday party, and she started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who's just realized they've been playing a game everyone else understood better than they did. Oh my God, she said. Oh my God, you're just like Michael. You're all just... She looked around the room, at Kate, who was crying, at the Harpers and Rodriguezes, who looked horrified, at her influencer friends, who were definitely recording this on their phones, despite trying to be subtle about it. Everyone wants something, Charlotte said. Michael wanted the perfect wife. Brandon wanted the perfect meal ticket. My grandfather, she looked at me, your grandfather wanted to prove he was right about me. He was right about you, I said quietly. Maybe, Charlotte said, or maybe you all made me into what you expected me to be. Maybe I never had a chance to be anything except what your grandfather saw at the wedding. The gold digger, the manipulator, the woman who married for security instead of love. She walked toward me, careful around the broken glass, stopped 3 feet away. I don't love you, Michael, she said. I haven't loved you in years. Maybe I never did. You're right about that. But you didn't love me either. You loved having a beautiful wife who looked good in photos and made you feel less alone. We used each other. The only difference is I got caught. The difference, I said, is I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. And when I found out what you were doing, I didn't expose you immediately. I gave you space. I gave you time. I gave you enough rope to hang yourself with. How generous, Charlotte said. It was, I said. More generous than you deserved. She stood there for a long moment. Then she turned to Brandon. Get out, she said. What? Get out of this apartment now. Take your suitcases and your protein shakes and your dreams of opening 10 gyms with my divorce settlement and get the hell out. Brandon looked at me, at Charlotte, at the 20 witnesses. He grabbed his jacket from the back of my chair. You're making a mistake, he said to Charlotte. I've made a lot of those, she said. This isn't one of them. He left. The door closed behind him. Nobody moved. Charlotte turned back to me. I need time to think, she said, about your offer, about my options. You have until midnight, I said, 45 minutes. That's not enough time to... It's more time than you gave me when you moved Brandon in 32 hours after I left, I said. It's more time than you gave my father's memory when you labeled his service medals junk. It's more time than you've given our marriage any day in the past 13 months. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears again. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did, I said. Maybe not at first. Maybe at first you just meant to do what made you happy. But eventually you knew you were hurting me and you did it anyway. Because your happiness mattered more than my dignity. I checked my watch. 44 minutes, I'll be in my study. When you've made your decision, let me know. I walked past her, past the broken glass, past Kate, who was openly sobbing now, past the other guests who were frozen like figures in a tableau. I went into my study, the study Charlotte and Brandon had packed up 2 weeks ago, the study that Trevor and Margaret had helped me restore yesterday, and I sat in my father's chair and I waited. I sat in my study for 30 minutes, listened to the sounds of the party dissolving, voices in the hallway, the front door opening and closing, Kate's voice, urgent and low. "Charlotte, you need to think about this, really think." Charlotte's response, too quiet to hear. More footsteps, more doors, the apartment growing quieter. At 11:52 p.m., Charlotte knocked on my study door. "Come in," I said. She opened the door. She'd cleaned up her makeup, changed out of the Zimmerman dress into jeans and a sweater. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just tired. "Everyone's gone," she said. "Kate stayed the longest, tried to convince me to leave, to not let you manipulate me like this." "Is that what I'm doing?" I asked. "Manipulating you?" "I don't know," Charlotte said. She walked to the window, looked out at Tribeca at midnight. Maybe we're all just manipulating each other and calling it different things." She turned back to face me. "I'll stay," she said, "for the 94 days. We'll do the separate bedrooms thing, the civil and public arrangement, and then on December 29th, we file for divorce." Something in my chest tightened. I'd expected this answer, had known probably that she'd choose the money, but hearing it out loud felt different than anticipating it. "You're sure?" I asked. "Am I sure I want $6 million instead of 500,000? Charlotte laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yes, Michael, I'm sure. You've made it very clear what kind of person I am. What your grandfather thought I was, what you've always suspected, so fine. I'll be that person. I'll stay for the money. I'll play the role you've written for me." "I didn't write this role," I said. "You did. 13 months ago when you started sleeping with Brandon. 2 weeks ago when you moved him into our home. Tonight when you planned to introduce him as your boyfriend while I was supposedly off finding myself." "You're right," she said. "I made choices, bad ones, selfish ones, and now I'm making another selfish choice. I'm choosing $6 million over my pride, over whatever's left of my dignity. Because you know what, Michael? You and your grandfather were right about me. I did marry you for security. I did stay for the lifestyle. And now I'm going to stay 94 more days for the biggest payout I can get." She walked to the door, stopped. "But let me tell you something about you," she said. "You didn't marry me for love either. You married me because I looked good on your arm, because I made you feel successful, because having a beautiful wife in a Tribeca penthouse made you feel like you'd won at life. We were both using each other. The only difference is I was honest enough with myself to know it." She left, closed the door behind her. I sat there in my study, in my father's chair, in the apartment I'd won back through surveillance and strategy and my grandfather's posthumous manipulation, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no sense of justice served, just emptiness. I thought about my grandfather's letter, about his warning that revenge cost something, that it had cost him 30 years of peace, that it had made him someone cruel. Had I become that? Someone cruel? I'd given Charlotte a choice, sure, but was it really a choice when both options humiliated her? Stay for money and prove she's a gold digger, or leave and prove she's impulsive and stupid. Either way, she lost. Either way, I won. Except I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I pulled out my phone, called Margaret. "It's done," I said. "She's staying for the 94 days. "And how do you feel?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," I said. "Ask me in 3 months. I hung up, walked out to the living room. The broken champagne glass was still on the floor. Nobody had cleaned it up. I got a broom from the kitchen, swept up the shards, mopped the champagne stain. The smell of it, sweet, inexpensive, and wasted, filled the apartment. I thought about Charlotte's speech that I'd interrupted, about authenticity and new beginnings, about living your truth, All of it bullshit, obviously. All of it performance. But then again, what was I doing? Playing the wronged husband, playing the strategic genius, playing the role my grandfather had written for me in his posthumous test. Maybe Charlotte was right. Maybe we were all just playing roles. Maybe nobody in this story was authentic. I finished cleaning, threw away the broken glass, put the broom back, stood in my kitchen at 1 a.m. in my apartment that felt more like a crime scene than a home, and I thought about the next 94 days. Charlotte in the master bedroom, me in the guest room, both of us performing a marriage for the lawyers and the inheritance clause and my grandfather's ghost. Both of us counting down the days until December 28th when the money would transfer and we could finally stop pretending. Would you do the same? If your wife had been cheating for over a year, if your grandfather had left you a test disguised as an inheritance, if you had the power to make her choose between her pride and $6 million, would you do it? Or would you take the high road my grandfather wrote about in his letter? Confront her privately, divorce quietly, walk away clean? I'd like to think there was a right answer, that one path was justice and the other was cruelty. But the truth is, I don't know anymore. I set out to expose Charlotte's betrayal, to make her understand what she'd thrown away, to architect a scenario where she'd reveal her true nature. And I succeeded. She chose the money, proved my grandfather right, proved herself to be exactly what he'd suspected at our wedding 6 years ago. But in proving her true nature, what did I prove about mine? That I'm patient, strategic, willing to watch my wife betray me for 8 months while I collected evidence, willing to use my grandfather's inheritance as a weapon, willing to humiliate her in front of 20 people at her birthday party. Are those virtues or vices? My grandfather said they could be both. I walked to the window, looked out at Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably in his Hell's Kitchen studio apartment, realizing he'd just lost his meal ticket. Somewhere, Kate was probably awake, worried about Charlotte, questioning what kind of friend lets this happen. Somewhere, my cousin James was going about his life in California, not knowing he'd almost inherited $12 million. And here I was, in my Tribeca penthouse, with my cheating wife in one bedroom and me in another, with 3 months until I became $12 million richer and officially divorced, with all the evidence and all the power and all the vindication I'd wanted, and I'd never felt more alone. I can't unhear the sound of that champagne glass shattering, can't unsee Charlotte's face when she realized what she'd been gambling with, can't unfeel the emptiness of winning a game that shouldn't have been played in the first place. My grandfather tested Charlotte. She failed. But maybe he was testing me too, testing whether I'd become like him, calculating, strategic, someone who wielded power like a weapon, someone who couldn't let go of being wronged. I don't know if I passed or failed that test. I just know that in 93 days, I'll be $12 million richer. I'll be divorced. I'll be free of Charlotte and her lies and the marriage that was never real. And I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I did the right thing or if I just did the thing that felt like justice in the moment. Here's what keeps me up at night. Charlotte's staying for the money, yes, but she's staying because I gave her a choice designed to damn her either way. My grandfather gave me that same kind of choice. Take the high road or the low road, and I chose the low one. So who's really being tested here? The apartment is quiet now. Charlotte's in the master bedroom. I'm in my study. And somewhere, I swear I can feel my grandfather watching, judging, waiting to see if I become him or if I find some third path he never wrote about in his letter. 94 days until my 36th birthday. 94 days until the inheritance transfers. 94 days until I find out if revenge cost me what it cost him, 3 decades of peace, and the ability to trust anyone ever again. I should probably tell you this is just a story, not advice. If you're dealing with betrayal in your own life, talk to a therapist. Talk to a lawyer. Don't take relationship guidance from someone who bugged his own apartment and staged an elaborate vanishing act. But if you're asking me whether I'd do it all again, knowing what I know now, knowing how hollow victory feels, knowing that I'll spend the next 3 months living with someone I despised enough to humiliate publicly, I honestly don't know. And that uncertainty, that moral ambiguity, might be the only authentic thing left in this whole mess. The champagne stain is gone. The glass is swept up. But some things, once broken, don't get put back together. I learned that tonight. I wonder what else I'll learn in the next 94 days.